Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another fantastic indie comic interview. We are keeping it geekly tonight with our good host and friend, or not host, I'm the host, our good guest, Randall, and we are going to be breaking down his brand new Kickstarter for a long-running series called Trekker. So welcome to the stream. How are you doing? And yeah, let's start breaking down this phenomenal comic. It's been running for, you said, 35 years?
Yeah, the white hair sort of indicates how that can happen. But yeah, it's something I created back then in the misty days of yore, back in the mid-1980s, when Dark Horse Comics and a lot of other independent companies were getting started at the time. Mm-hmm. And I happened to be in the right place, right time, got an invitation to come and create something for them. I was already working for DC Comics. I was on a regular monthly book called Warlord for DC Comics. So I was kind of in a pretty good spot back then. That was, back in the mid 80s.
Is that where you first started, was working for those companies?
Yeah, I started for DC and Marvel back in the day. Back then, if you wanted to work in comic books, you kind of had to work for DC or Marvel. They were the comic companies, basically. So
what was the application process like starting out back then? Because I'm sure it's way different now.
It is different now. So I'm born and raised in Portland, Oregon. Loved comic books. Always thought, wouldn't it be cool to be a comic book artist? But that was like saying, wouldn't it be cool to be, an astronaut?
Yeah.
Because back when I was a kid, again, there was DC Comics and Marvel Comics, and you had Archie and stuff too. But really, if you want to do what I considered comic books, it was those two companies. They were both in the middle of Manhattan, which was 3,000 miles away from me. And there was no internet. There was there was nothing to. There was a long ways. It was like another world almost. Then one of my comic book heroes, a guy named Joe Kubert, comic book legend. I admired his work when I was a kid. He did Sergeant Rock and Enemy Ace, and he did this amazing adaptation of the first few Tarzan novels and serialized them as comic books. And I just loved that stuff so much. Anyway, when I was in college, going to college in Portland, I saw an ad in a comic trade zine then for the Joe Kubert School of Cartoon and Graphic Arts Incorporated in Dover, New Jersey. And even though I was daunted by the fact that it was 3,000 miles away, I couldn't not give it a shot. So I sent in a portfolio. Yeah. I sent in a portfolio, and next thing I know, I'm having a phone interview with Joe Kubert.
Oh my God! How was that? How was that?
I was just numb. I mean, it was so surreal to be talking to somebody whose work was legendary and that I personally idolized and admired so much. And yet, the thing about Kubert was, as amazing an artist as he was, as accomplished as he was, and as strong a personality as he had, he was the most generous, kind, affable guy. Even on the phone, he just made you feel like you were just talking to another guy, a buddy. Hey, we like to do comics.
Isn't it crazy? Cool. And he's like famous. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and, he just has a gift for that. That's who he is. He was he had no affectations. He had no sense of. I mean, he knew he was damn good. He knew how good he was, but he didn't. He never tried to impress you with that. He didn't need to say it because you knew it, So he was mostly just about, he really loved great storytelling and making great comic books. And that enthusiasm and passion for doing that's what came across. So anyway, I wound up moving to New Jersey. I went to Joe's school. At the time, not only was he a great artist, he was also editing the Sergeant Rock comic book at DC. Mm-hmm. And some of the students at the school, as we were getting near graduating, it was only a 2-year program then, but Joe would sort of handpick some of the students that seemed to be the most likely to go into comic books. And we started doing a few short stories for him in the back of the Sergeant Rock book.
Whoa.
And then that led us to, get on the radar of other editors at DC. And
what a cool move, something that he didn't have to do, but
no, he didn't.
And he wanted to help you guys exceed in your field. That was such an awesome move. So which short story were you involved with?
Well, there was a few that were in the back of Sergeant Rock, little short 2, 3, 4-page stories. The main series was called The Men of Easy. Easy Company was the company that Sergeant Rock was the the sergeant of, and they had this colorful cast of soldiers in the squad, and they would do these little short stories of individual stories of each one of those characters and stuff. So we got to do little stories like that, other little random stories, war stories, a 4-page story set in World War I, things like that. So I got to do some of those. Then eventually that led to me doing a backup series in the Warlord comic book. Called The Barren Earth. That was my
so
first.
Awesome.
That was my first ongoing work in comics. Was it? And so this new writer, a young writer named Gary Cohn, who created things like The Blue Devil with his partner Dan Mishkin. Gary and I teamed up and we did this. It was basically Gary's idea. It was sort of like an Edgar Rice Burroughs science fiction, far in the future setting. And I just loved that kind of stuff as a kid. As a kid, I was reading books like Dune and seeing any science fiction movie that came across my mind. So when Star Wars came out,
Yeah. So anyway, how did it feel to be a little kid that loved these comics, worshiping them, and now you're working at DC? Like, how did that moment feel when you first started working on the first book?
God, how can I put it? Well, when I started working on the Barren Earth, I'd say, that really felt like it was hitting a jackpot. It was an honor working with Joe, but I was young enough that I didn't know how great an honor it really was. It's one of those things. Looking back on it, I appreciate it a lot more. But I was super lucky that I got to go to the school with this guy, and Joe. He admired the classic storytellers, the guys that created Prince Valiant and Flash Gordon and stuff like that. And he just communicated those sort of solid ideas and ideals for how to tell great stories. So that was great. Then working with Gary on the Barren Earth it sort of checked all the pleasure boxes for me. The science fiction stuff, it featured a strong female lead character. Very few of those were around back in the early 1980s when he got this thing started. It was like this. The conceit was that the sun was be turning into a red giant, so it was getting bigger and getting closer to the Earth. So the Earth was like this baked desert planet. Oh. It's kind of like Dune sort of setting.
Real quick, we got Trekker Talk in the chat saying that the Barren Earth is a wonderful series. So I'd have to check that out. That is something that slipped under my radar. And real quick, before we start diving too far away from your time at that school, I wanted to ask, what was one of the most important lessons you would say you learned during your 2-year time there? One of the biggest things that you took away?
Get the work done. No, seriously. It's really easy to enter into a creative field that involves the imagination, and you're trying to explore emotional depth, and you're trying to generate your own personal vision, and you want everything to be inspired, and you can become very, very precious about what you do. If you want to make one of the biggest messages I got from Joe and the other teachers at the school, all of who were 10, 15, 20-year veterans in the field of comics, commercial art, cartooning at the time, it was, inspiration will get you almost nowhere. You sit around waiting for inspiration to strike to do your work, and you won't get anything produced. And you've got to produce in comics. It's a monthly deadline. It's merciless.
Yeah.
You miss the deadlines, you're out of work pretty soon. So, I learned a lot of, practical things about, drawing, constructing pages, storytelling, all of that stuff. Putting the script first is always super important to Joe. The script you read, it's your job to serve that story. Tell it vividly, tell it clearly, all that stuff. But really, you put as much time as you can in on that, but you're always taking a look at what the deadline is, and you hit that deadline. So, yeah, that's the first one that pops into mind.
Yeah, because I know, as myself, I'm a perfectionist, so I can't even imagine trying to be an artist, and trying to meet a deadline, and you're like, well, this doesn't look the way I want it to work, but I have other pages I got to work on.
Absolutely.
How do you get through that? That seems like it would be such a hard thing, because you want your product to look as good as possible, right? Yeah.
The it's basically you pick your battles and you say better luck next time a lot. One thing, again, I'm pretty sure it was Joe, one of the teachers there said, the definition of a professional in this business is somebody who you've got a certain level of quality in your work that your work does not go below. On your best days, you're working at 100%. You're playing over your head, like they'd say in sports. You're doing great work, and you're just cruising along and you feel like you're the baddest ass artist in the world. And the next day you've got nothing. You draw everything and it's clunky and it's flat and it's unimaginative. And so when you're a professional, that day, your worst day, is one where you still turn in work that is solid enough that it isn't going to embarrass the company that's publishing your work. And you just hope that you have a lot more of those days that are near the top end of things. So you've got to be willing to make compromises. The category I fall into is commercial artist, and those are contradictory terms. Mm-hmm. Commercial, you're trying to make money, you're trying to maximize profit, you're producing. Artist is exactly the opposite of all of that. So you've got to, on some panels I'm drawing and I'll say, this is really clicking, it's working well. If I devote, another 20 minutes or 3 hours or whatever it is to it, it's going to be a really special shot, and I'm going to do that. And then the next panel, good enough. So, and then the panel after that, so you just have to again pick your battles. And for me, the passion I have is the one that I got from Joe, which is tell the story. And I can't stop long enough to be precious over every single detail. My story won't get told, and that's the worst thing. I want to get this story told. So that's what motivates me.
Like, how would someone determine that level for them? That level, like, where they don't want to dip underneath a certain line for their quality of work. Like, how is that, like, easiest achieved, I guess?
The only thing, I don't have a good, simple answer for that. The only thing I can say is draw an awful lot. As you draw, you'll get a sense. The first sense you'll get is you never do as good as you want to do, or almost never.
Yeah.
And you just have to get to the point where you say, I'm a little bit embarrassed about this, but it's time to move on. And eventually just, one of the biggest educational moments that I had was when I turned in my first story and didn't see it again until it came out in print. Because a few months had gone by then, mm-hmm. and there's a little that the objectivity that time brings. And I was seeing it in a completely different context. I was so close to it, working on the big original art pages, that seeing it reduced and printed in a book, and a few months later, I was just shocked at how bad, how many mistakes I could see in my own work.
What were some of those mistakes, though?
Basic drawing mistakes, construction of figures, getting the perspective wrong, not spotting shadows in a way that effectively guides the eye to the most important thing in that panel. Mm-hmm. It's all over the map, sloppy rendering. I could go on and on and on.
I mean, I love hearing you break it down, because it is like right off the bat, like such a wealth of information. I knew this was going to be a good one, and I love hearing it, because it's like I'm learning so much just as like a consumer and like a reader of comics. So I can only imagine what the other side of like the creator side is learning from this as well.
Well, hard-earned lessons. I've been at this a long time, and you, as they always say, you learn more from your failures than from your successes. And so maybe I failed my way to a certain amount of knowledge.
So you were at DC. How did you end up getting to a Trekker issue #1?
Funny story. Glad you asked. So I was living back in New Jersey. Got my foot in the door at DC, and then a little bit later at Marvel. But Portland was my home. I always knew in my heart that I would want to come back to the Pacific Northwest. So finally, after I'd been there for about a total of 8 years between school and getting going, mm-hmm. packed up and moved back to Portland, thinking, well, again, still 3,000 miles away from the industry, but I think I'm sort of established well enough that I can, use Federal Express and fax machines to stay in touch well enough to keep the career going. At least that was my hope. It just happened that the summer that I was moving back here to Portland, 1985, was around the time that Dark Horse Comics and these other small independent publishers were just starting to ramp up and get going. Mm-hmm. So shortly after I was back home, I was invited to be a guest at a local comic book show. I went there, met a few other, I didn't even know when I was growing up as a kid that there were other aspiring professional comic artists in Portland. Turned out there were, and a few of them were out at the show together. I'm tabling there at the show. By the way, this little story is an illustration of the fact that when you're trying to get into a business like this, so much of it's right place, right time.
Yeah.
So like I said, I just happened to move back to Portland the summer the Dark Horse is starting up. I happened to meet a guy at a local comic book shop who was running this convention and invited me to come as a guest. I met there, and when I'm sitting at my table, talking to fans, doing sketches. These two tall guys came by my table. They introduced themselves as Mike Richardson and Radley Stradley, the guys who were starting Dark Horse Comics.
Wow.
And they were looking to get some established working professional artists to come and do some work for their little starting company, because they wanted to have a level of professionalism to their work, And so to make a long story short, they said, if you will come and work for us, we will pay you your rate and you can do whatever you want. And I
That's
knew
like every person's dream, right?
Yeah, I knew I would never hear that sentence again in my life, and I was right. But anyway, so despite the fact that, like I said, I was working on a steady, regular gig for DC Comics, which was hard to beat at the time, unless somebody dangled that carrot, total creative freedom, and they'll pay you for it. So I said I can't not try that. So I then had to ask myself the serious question, because it meant sort of leaving the safety and stability of working with DC Comics. What would it be worth taking that risk? It would have to be to do my dream project. So I thought about that a lot. What would my dream project be? And Trekker was the answer that I came up with. And if I give myself credit for anything, it's that I guess I answered that question pretty well, because here I am 35 years later, and I'm still thrilled to be working on Trekker.
Absolutely. We have Rad Adventures Network saying they love hearing Ron talk about the origins of Trekker. I have to say, I do too. Like it's such an insane. So you said you worked for Marvel too?
Yeah, I did. Not a lot. I did a few short stories for them. I did a story with Spider-Man and Black Cat in the back of a Peter Parker Spectacular or something like that. So a few stories for Marvel, but most of the work I did when I was back east was for DC.
So what was it like in the beginning with Dark Horse? Because you said you met these guys like right at the start of everything. So how was that, like just being a part of that in the beginning?
It felt to me like the way people described the beginnings of the Marvel age of comics, where Stan and Jack and few guys are spitballing ideas in there, and it's a lean, mean machine, because there's not much, there's not a lot behind them. There's not a lot of expectations. They were just sort of flying by the seat of their pants, was the impression that I got about the way Marvel was going. Coming up with ideas and getting them going, and there was some of that same kind of energy and enthusiasm at Dark Horse. That's one reason I pitched the concept for Trekker to them. Science fiction series about a young woman who's a bounty hunter, and has the series about the long arc that her life takes. It's a gradual evolution of a character and things like that. And they had no business to say yes to that. It was a completely non-commercial idea back then. But they liked the idea. We were sort of on the same page, temperamentally, and the sort of books that we like. And so with that sort of youthful enthusiasm, they said, that sounds great, Ron, let's do it. So that's how I got started.
Real quick, we have two questions in the chat. Strider Nolan saying, does he do anything other than Trekker these days? Is it a full-time gig, or do you have a day job? And then Trekker Talk asking if you did some early work on Venom for Marvel.
Yeah, so the Marvel question first. I did work in the 90s. I did a Venom miniseries called Separation Anxiety, and I also did a series of it. Yeah.
He's like, you might have heard of it.
Also, there was a brief period of time when Marvel actually owned the rights for Star Trek, and I did the Next Generation stories in their Star Trek Unlimited book. So I've had some experiences there as well.
You could say.
And then the other question was, do I do anything now besides Trekker, or is it a full-time gig? And the answer is, it is a full-time gig and then some, because I write the stories, I pencil them, I ink them, I letter them, I color them, I run the Kickstarter campaigns for them, I fulfill the Kickstarter campaigns, and then it's time for another one. So it's pretty much a full-time gig for me. I know that a lot of creators on Kickstarter do have day jobs, and their kickstarting projects, like, I honestly don't know how these people can do it. I cannot imagine working like a full-time job and then putting all that I need to do into this. People compliment the Kickstarters that I run as being, well run, and that I communicate well.
They look gorgeous. They're well structured. Yeah.
And that's I do put everything I have into these things. I am so passionate about doing Trekker, and when I realized that Kickstarter was the the ideal platform for me to continue this series with. I put everything I have into it, but also I've got all that time to put into it because the backers support it well enough that it's just about self-sustaining, meaning it pays me for all the time it takes to write and draw the books, as well as to pay the printers and the shippers and the fulfillment service, all that sort of stuff. It takes a lot of money if you're doing this not as a hobby, not as a part-time side gig, but this is my life. This is what I do. This is my career, and I'm all in. I'm all in on it.
So we have Strider saying, good to know someone can make a living at this. One big thing to acknowledge is he's been at this for 35 years straight. So that's 35 years of building a following, his skills, and everything in between. I mean, I'm excited to break into it some more. So you're talking to Dark Horse. You're presenting the skeleton of this. At the time, did you have it spanning out for the 35-year period, or did you have to make some changes along the way?
I don't know if I say change. So what I did was I pitched the idea, the concept. I knew where I wanted her, the character Mercy St. Clair. I knew where I wanted her story to start. I had a pretty clear view of that. I knew in sort of vague or broad terms where I wanted it to go. How to get there and what specifically that would look like, I had very, very fuzzy ideas about at the time. So my thinking was, okay, what story do I think I'm competent to tell right now that I can sort of, land the plane safely without a crash landing? Do it. So I thought, well, short form stories, like a 24-page story that we serialized in 3 8-page chapters in Dark Horse Presents. It was their anthology book back in the day. I thought, well, I could tell an 8-page first part of a story. I think I can handle that, and it could be solid and competent.
So I was wondering.
I was trying to take small bites. Yeah.
I was wondering when I read the first issue. I was like, this page count seems a little small. Maybe that's how they did it back then, but it makes sense because of that. So we started out with Mercy St. Clair, a female bounty hunter. Where did you come up with the concept for her? I noticed you saying that you like Star Wars. Was Boba Fett any sort of correlation to wanting to create a bounty hunter?
No, he really wasn't. Back when I was doing Trekker, Boba Fett wasn't on my radar at all. I mean, he became a very popular character, but it was such a minor character in the Star Wars world that at the time, that he. So where did it come from? That's a really good question. I mean, I remember very distinctly I was going for a walk, and I said, well, I know I'd want to do a science fiction series because I love Dune, and I love Flash Gordon, and I love Star Wars, and just about anything that had science fiction I was really interested in. And I knew I wanted a series that could move around. So a character that was, somehow the bounty hunter idea seemed like it's like a freewheeling sort of character. They can be tracking down one criminal, it can take them to this sort of environment or setting, another one can go elsewhere. So it just seemed like it had enough expansiveness to it because I wanted a series that could have lots of different settings and put my character through a lot of changes and through a lot of different paces and gradually evolve her over the time. Her experiences shape and change her like they do incrementally with all of us. So I can't say exactly where it came from. I know I also liked Westerns. And bounty hunters in the Wild West, and of course, by now it's pretty well. A lot of people have drawn the parallels. There's a lot in common with a lot of good science fiction and a lot of good westerns. There's some similarities there. So that sort of bled into it too. Also, while I say I like science fiction, I mostly like the sort of like a Firefly sort of science fiction, where there's gears and ratchets and levers, as opposed to the really streamlined, sophisticated, high concept science fiction stuff. I tend to be a little bit more nuts and bolts about it, leather straps and padding and bullets in the chamber sort of science fiction, as opposed to
I really,
lasers and time travel.
Yeah, with Trekker issue 1, I noticed that you had the futuristic setting, but it was like a realistic, like modern futuristic feel. You still had like regular looking skyscrapers, the revolvers, like with the 6-shooters, but then like the car, I loved because it looked like the futuristic cartoons I was used to watching when I was a kid growing up. How it had the old school look to it, but it was futuristic still, like a belt, like the Bel Air, like fin tails and everything on them. Like it was awesome. Yep. I loved it. Now, the world building is just phenomenal, though. So, real quick, Overtures, was that the last one you worked on before this Kickstarter? Or is that?
Let me do overtures. No, after overtures, that was the backup in Hunter's Moon, if I remember right, or is that Rigel? Gosh, the backup stories are a little bit. I'm gonna.
He's like, I got so much.
I do got a lot. No, so yeah, you're right. That was in Hunter's Moon. So, yeah, so you were looking at the website, the Trekker Comics.
Yes. Yep.
.com
I gotta
website.
do my homework. Yeah. I can't be a bump on a log.
So what that is that's like my online archive where I post all the Trekker stories. I do one page every week. But the stories that I'm running on Kickstarter and everything are now running ahead of that. Mm-hmm. So these stories will eventually get there, but right now I'm focused on.
Well, I was gonna say the world building. I'm apologizing if I'm mispronouncing it. Is it Rigel or
Rigel?
Rigel. So Rigel was mentioned in Trekker issue 1, and then it was mentioned. And then we see her there in overtures. Because I read like the first 3 issues. I wanted to get a good feel of how the writing, how the art looks. Because back then you were doing just the art and the writing. You had a letterer, but now you're doing everything. Yeah. And you're doing color on top of that because it was just black and white back then. So like the world building has just been phenomenal. So man, where do we begin? How has it has it been hard keeping that world building intact over the years?
There are places where, over the years I have to go back and try not to trip myself up. What did I refer to that as before? But what helped me, I think, was, like I said, at the very beginning, I knew where we're starting out. I knew generally that I wanted the scale to just become really expansive. At the time, I was a young writer. I knew I didn't have the chops to really pull off like the sprawling science fiction epic that I was aspiring to have. So what I thought I could do was, I can plant some seeds in those early stories, make references to things happening out in the stars. And I said, by the time Mercy gets out into the stars, I'll know what's going on.
Yeah.
And luckily for me, it's kind of worked out that way. So I planted a few seeds, mentioning Rigel and things like that, and sort of let them sort of percolate as I was getting my chops down by telling these self-contained sort of adventure stories. So she gets this bad guy. She runs afoul of this criminal organization. Then she has to leave the city and go out into the blasted wastelands beyond New Galaf to track down a mass murderer, desperado sort of guy. That was my real Western show.
Just spoiled it for me. I got to the part where she escaped Gatefish setting her up, and then she talked to her uncle, and then had her uncle set the trap. Now it's ruined. We have some activity in chat real quick. Trekker Talk. Okay. I always thought Mercy St. Clair could exist in the world of Blade Runner. I would agree with that. I think Blade Runner would be a really cool world. We have Irish Imbes. I'm really sorry if I mispronounced that. Does Ron think it was necessary to have an established body of Trekker work completed and fan base before he could practically launch into the Kickstarter approach to production? So I think that's actually a good question. So how much of Trekker did you have completed before you started doing Kickstarter?
A lot. I had hundreds of pages of Trekker drawn, and that's going to sound. If you're somebody who's aspiring to, create your own series, and you say, "Oh, I think I'll try to do this on Kickstarter," it's very tricky. I had a lot of things going for me. I had, as you say, Trekker had been published by Dark Horse Comics, sort of off and on for several years. Then I was away from it for about a decade. And when I got back to it, I brought it back as the webcomic, trekkercomic.com, thinking this is a way to get the character sort of back on the landscape a little bit and find a way to get it back into print. So I did that with Dark Horse again for a little while, and then realized, no, it's just not going to come out on the frequency and in the formats. They don't have the ability to bring it out as I wanted to come out. So that's when I made the move to Kickstarter. So that is a lot of foundation that I had laid over the course of a long time.
Did you have to run into any trouble trying to take what you came out with for Dark Horse and take it and publish it on your own? Was there any sort of loopholes you had to go through or anything?
No. Mike Richardson has always been incredibly supportive of creators. When I first created Trekker, the deal was I would get to own it, and he has honored that to the letter every step of the way. That is so
awesome. So, if you don't mind me asking, what was it? What drove you away from Dark Horse? That kind of seemed like it was the perfect setup.
It was a great setup. What caused me to take the book away is that when I so Trekker had her own series for a while, but the black and white boom sort of had a bit of an implosion too, and Trekker hadn't found a large enough audience that Dark Horse could continue to put it out at the pace I wanted to and pay me as much as I needed to live at the time. So I reduced my work on Trekker to a short story here or a standalone episode there. It was a very sporadic sort of way to get the book out there, which is incredibly frustrating for me, for the readers. A story would appear someplace and they wouldn't see it, that sort of stuff. So finally, after that sort of on again, off again thing, dragging out over many years while I was working on other series at the time, because I needed to make a living.
Yeah.
Finally, I just said, this is just too frustrating. I'm just going to have to put Trekker completely on hold until I can find a way to get back to it sort of full time and tell the stories, that will come out on a consistent, regular basis so that the readers can follow it and so that the audience can grow. Because I think a steady, regular, reliable presence in the market is essential for a book to really grow. Mm-hmm. So when I eventually realized, there's this thing called the internet, and I could turn Trekker into webcomic. So I took the over 200 pages that I'd done of Trekker already, from the very first story to when I finally put it on hiatus, and I started to serialize those on the website. Anyway, then I got back to working with Dark Horse again. So to answer your question, Dark Horse said, we'd like to put out a little bit more Trekker. So I said, that's great. I'm not screwing around. I'm committed to staying with the series. Now I'm going to ride this pony and get this story told. By now, I had a pretty clear idea about where I was going. It was going to take a long time to get there.
Were you doing coloring at that point, or was it still black and white?
No, not at that time. Not at that time. When I first got back to doing it with Dark Horse, they wanted it in color because they thought, well, this will give us a chance to get a bigger audience and so on. So we brought in a colorist. So we put out a collection of the earlier stuff, and then we put out one new trade, and then we put out a second one that I did start to color because I didn't have enough money to afford a colorist. Well, I guess I'll do it myself. But what happened was that these trades would come out, and Dark Horse would sort of see how it did, and it takes it a while to make its money back. I don't think they ever lost any money on Trekker, but it wasn't like a big money making thing for it. Trekker did not find a huge audience right off the bat, and Dark Horse.
Sorry to interrupt you, but like when they go to pay you, do you have to sell like X amount before you get cut a check, or like how did that work? If you're allowed to talk about it.
Right. They paid me a page rate up front. Okay. That was moderate. I guess it was reasonable given the scale of Trekker. And the idea is that as the book sells well enough to earn more, then I can get some more money that way. So I mean, I don't have any quibbles at all with Dark Horse as far as the way they treated me as a creator, as the way they tried to take care of me. It was simply the fact that basically, Trekker was a small fish in their pond. So they have a line of books they need to put out. They know they need to make a certain amount of money every quarter or whatever. So they put out the books that they feel have the best chance to earn back their money and that sort of stuff. So Trekker, while I know that Mike has a personal affection for the series and we have a personal friendship, but it just came down to they weren't willing to commit to putting Trekker out on a regular enough basis that I was confident in. And so I said, I'm going to get back into the same boat that I was before. They'll put out an issue of Trekker, see how it does, and then a while later they'll find room in their publishing schedule and they'll put out another issue of Trekker. That's fine if Trekker is, like one of those sideline projects. But it had turned into that for me once, and I wasn't going to let it happen again if I could possibly help it. So after thinking about it some and talking with them, I just realized that if I really want Trekker to unfold as I feel it serves the series and the readers and the characters best, I was going to have to, take the leap of faith and go to Kickstarter.
Again, take it again, right? Like you left DC to do this project, and then you left Dark Horse to do this project. Like, right. This is a true passion for you. Real quick, we have Ira Schimmel, and I apologize if I mispronounce that. Saying hi, Ron, and that this is Jay. By the way, their YouTube account is under their first name, so they're saying hi, and that everything worked out very well in their opinion. I have to say, you took some pretty big jumps. Did you ever, I guess, regret leaving DC? Did you ever at like any point feel like you should have stayed, or felt like maybe you shouldn't have left like Dark Horse? Or is this something that you just fully felt like you needed to just leave and like take it out on your own?
Yeah, the decisions that I made When I first left DC to start working on Trekker, it isn't that there wasn't trepidation. It isn't like I didn't have palpitations, but I just felt that to not do it would be I would regret that if I didn't give it a shot. And the same with when I made the move to Kickstarter. I felt I owe it to. It's a promise I sort of made to myself and to the readers, and frankly to the characters in the book, that I would do everything.
So how did that first Kickstarter go for you? Like how did the setup go? Like what did you learn like with your first Kickstarter?
Yeah, well, a lot. So before I ran the Kickstarter, so this is getting back to someone who's asking a bit about how to do Kickstarters, and did I feel I needed to have the background with Trekker I did beforehand. So I've got a lot to say about this. I'll try to keep it kind of brief. One thing I'd say,
quick, where was this in this point of time? Like how long ago was this with your first one?
About 5 years ago, something like that.
So you just recently left our course to start this.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha.
Something like that. If I remember, it's a little bit. I'm not great at retaining all the.
No, you're fine. I just wanted to kind of get a good idea of the timeline.
Right. Yeah. So when I was getting ready to run my first Kickstarter, the main thing I knew was that I didn't know anything about Kickstarter. I'm in a studio with a bunch of other artists, and some of them had run Kickstarters, and I heard conversations about it. So I knew it existed. I knew roughly what it was, but how to go about crafting a campaign, and it just seemed like it was this huge amorphous mass with, like looking at a machine with all sorts of dials and buttons and knobs. I didn't know what to push. So I reached out to some colleagues I knew that had run campaigns and picked their brains and just tried to get ideas. And my good friend, Carl Kiesel, who's a wonderful comic book creator himself, he had done a Kickstarter and had great success with it. And he he's a very generous guy. He offered to sort of show me the ropes. He said, Ron, if you ever decide to make the move to Kickstarter, I'd like to, help you get that going. So I just got a lot of good coaching from people, and learned a lot about how try to go and set up a campaign that would be sort of multifaceted enough to have different levels that could appeal to different sort of backers, but not be so complex that it would make my brain explode trying to fulfill it and stuff like that. And another thing I would say is it's called crowdfunding. You need a crowd, and if you one friend of mine, Tom Mandrake, who's a great artist for DC Comics and stuff, he had run a Kickstarter, and I was talking to him about it, and he said, I noticed that he had mentioned somewhere in his campaign that he had spent some money on advertising. And I said, can I ask you, Tom, what did you find was the best use of money that you'd spent? And he said he paid, and he had a 1 hour consultant conversation with somebody consulting about, crowdfunding projects. And he had a lot of good pointers from that person. And so I said, what's her number? And I did the same thing. And because I didn't have a huge, massive following on social media, which is largely how you get your followings for something like Kickstarter, because that's the world it lives in, right? I was sending out emails to people that I knew, and I was told to sort of post relentlessly and steadily throughout the campaign, which I do, and that is a lot of work. But you need to get a crowd. If you don't already bring it with you because you just had a phenomenally successful run drawing Spider-Man or something, you've got to find a way to generate a crowd from the people that you know in your life, everybody that you lived with, whatever it might be.
So we got Jay in chat saying even that first campaign, Ron got Trekker to all of us readers like he's been doing it for years, and each campaign has gotten better and better. So what was that first campaign's goal, if you don't mind me asking? Like, and how was Kickstarter? So 5 years ago, it had to have been a lot different than it is today. So do you find it was like a little bit harder kind of getting into Kickstarter around that time?
Actually, I can't really speak to that. My experience of Kickstarter, as far as interacting with the platform, has been pretty similar. It hasn't changed for me dramatically in those 5 or 6 years. So my goal when I ran that first campaign, like I said, I had no idea. I knew that there were some people that liked Trekker, but I had no idea what the site, what those numbers would be like, and how many of them would take the trouble to go to this platform and find it there and back it there, because it's a whole different thing than walking into a comic book shop and picking something off the shelf and putting down a few bucks. It's a whole different thing, and I didn't know how the following that Traeger had, how would that translate and transfer to this new media. So I thought, I don't know, maybe I could raise $8,000, $10,000. And then I looked into the costs at the time of, as best as I could determine them, of how much would it cost to print the book as I want it to be, and how much would it cost to ship the book. And I looked at these numbers and I said, if I just want to break even on that end, not even getting paid a dime for writing and drawing the book, I'm going to have to ask for like $15,000. I said, there's no way I can raise $15,000. But that's what I had to do. So that's what I set as my funding goal. And I thought, I'm going to be sweating the last 5 hours of the campaign. I'm going to be sweating bullets, hoping a couple $1,000 come in and save my ass. Well, I was surprised because it did well. It funded in a day and a half.
Wow.
And nobody was more surprised than me. Believe me, I was so blown away by that kind of support. And that was good because, as I said, that initial funding goal, and this is pretty much the way I support all of my campaigns now. I set that initial funding goal, which has gone up because costs have gone up and everything. But that basically covers the costs of printing the book and shipping the book and paying the Kickstarter fees and the fulfillment service that I use to help me manage it all. Doesn't pay me for writing the book, doesn't pay me for drawing the book or lettering the book or coloring the book, or the weeks that I spend building the campaign, or the solid month that I spend essentially running the Kickstarter campaign. So I can't keep doing this for a living if I just hit my funding goal.
Yeah.
So we hit the funding goal. That's great. That means the book can go to a printer and people can get it.
But how are you going to eat then?
Exactly. How am I going to put any oatmeal on the table? So that's what the stretch goals are for. The stretch goals add extra goodies. We add features to the book, more pages, more content, spot cover gloss and things like that. And then there's other things where you add prints and posters and that sort of stuff. So that money, the extra money that we hit those stretch goals at, some of that goes to manufacturing those items or adding those features, and the other starts to put money back in my pocket to recoup. Because when I launch a Kickstarter campaign, and this is another thing that I have going for me that a lot of people aren't in a position to do, my comic is done. The story is written and drawn. It's basically ready to go to the printer when I start the campaign. A lot of people run the Kickstarter campaigns to finance them having the time to then write and draw their book.
Yeah.
Which means it's going to take a lot longer for that book to come out, even if there aren't any delays. And
you're just waiting for the printer to ship it back.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, I have some extra stuff. Like I do one of the rewards people can do on my campaign, for instance, is I will draw them into the book. But since the main story is already done, I do a little backup story where I can, draw the backers in the book as characters, and they can have adventures and stuff.
That's cool.
It's a really popular reward, and they also get, and I will send them the page of original art that I've drawn them in the story at. So it's a really fun reward. I love telling those extra backup stories of the characters because it's more like sort of slice of life stories.
That's such a unique spin on it, because a lot of people will draw they'll save a big panel or a big splash to draw them in, but you actually come up with a whole new story. Do you have that sort of like set up in your head before, or do you kind of come up with that like after the campaign?
It's gone both ways. Sometimes before I launch the campaign, I'll have a rough concept of what that short little backup story will be. Other times I sort of in the middle of the campaign, it comes to me then. I always try to make it something that coordinates, with the main story and sometimes with previous stories that have come before. Those backup stories are ones that, it's not the main A-line story, of course, but at the same time, it's all interwoven and interconnected with the entire series. It's the idea is they add a little bit of extra richness and texture to the world that way. Anyway, so yeah, I get the campaigns set up, and I try to have everything pretty much in place before I hit that launch button.
So, I mean, your first Kickstarter, 15,000. 6 Kickstarters later, 50,000. Wow. You are like living every indie comic creator's dream, it seems like. With the hard work, obviously, that you do put the work in, but I mean, how does it feel to kind of just be hitting these numbers after putting so much work and so many years into it?
What can I say? I feel incredibly grateful. It's unbelievably, gratifying and affirming. But the thing that because what it really means to me, it gives me basically when I look at how the campaigns are doing, it's pretty much exactly the same feeling I have when I'm sitting at a comic convention and somebody comes up to my table and they say, "Hi, Ron, I want you to know I really like Trekker and I love the character of Mercy St. Clair." As a creator, nothing means more to me than feeling that these characters that I created. The main thing I wanted to do when I first started doing Trekker when I first came up with the idea in 1986, I wanted to create characters that readers would believe in and feel a connection to. Those are the stories that always work the best for me. So when I'm at a convention and somebody says that to me, it's almost like, kindred spirit. All the things that I'm the most passionate about as far as comic books and superheroes and character and telling great stories, we're on the same page because that stuff works for you too. And so when I see the campaigns get people coming to them and more finding them all the time, it says, yeah, the stuff that I am passionate about and have been trying to do well for all these years, I guess it's working on some level. And that's pretty darn fulfilling.
Yeah. So let's go ahead. Why don't we start breaking into the Kickstarter? I think this would be a good opportunity. Okay. And then afterwards, I feel like I gotta ask you some questions because 7 Kickstarters and 35 years in the game, you definitely have some information out there. So we are going to be breaking down Trekker: Blood in the Wind. This is a 120 plus page graphic novel about the sci-fi bounty hunter Mercy St. Clair's quest leads to a deadly duel in the icy clouds of a remote frozen world. So 722 backers. And you are like 14 days into it, so you're not even halfway into your campaign. Wow. So where would you say some of the biggest things that have led to the success of your Kickstarter outside of having like a pre-existing following has been? Like, what type of things are you doing on social media? I guess like what are you doing? Like, what type of work are you doing to get these numbers?
Boy, that's a good question. I am on Twitter and on Facebook throughout the entire campaign. Several times a day, I'm doing posts and tweets. And when I was advised to do that, I made a horrified sounding noise, and the person said, "Yeah, I know that's way out of your comfort zone, but I didn't have a really big crowd, and if you want to get one, you've got to work for it." And so, and my approach to that was, I said, if I saw somebody on Twitter and they constantly were saying the same thing about their series over and over again, I would just mute that person pretty quickly. So what I try to do is I try to craft each of my posts to have, something, there's an image from the series. And again, I have the advantage of the entire book has been drawn. So I've got all the art from the series. I can pull a panel from here or a panel from there. And so I try to use different images and come up with little dumb dad joke sort of humor, but some silly pun or something that's kind of clever, so that there's some sort of entertaining content just in the post, and then ending with a link to the campaign on it. Sometimes that works. Sometimes I'll do several of those, and it seems like they're falling on deaf ears. You just never know. So I do a lot of that. But I think the biggest thing that I do really that's helped the growth of the campaigns is I try to be responsive to backers when they call, when they get a hold of me with questions and concerns, and I try to do really good books. I fulfill the campaigns in a timely fashion, try to make the extra rewards as good as I can, so that when a reader, gets their box in the mail, their package, and they opens it up, they're excited and pleased. And then And the most important, it's great when they pick out the little tchotchkes and extras and they like those and are impressed by those. That's great. None of that means anything to me if they then pick up the book and they read it and said, that was okay. I'm not doing this to do something okay. I want them to read the book and say, wow, that was a great adventure I just experienced.
I think we have the same mindset for like our branch. Like that's like for me, I was telling you earlier how I had that interview and my voice didn't go through. So I spent 2 days like voicing over, and it's because like when people like associate my brand, I want them to think of hard work, like someone who's going to get it done. Like, so I noticed you got Project We Love. Is this your first time getting it, or have you had it on other Kickstarters?
I've had it on most, if not all, of the other Kickstarters.
So, as someone who's had Project We Love, so I know that is a covenant thing within the Kickstarter world. There's no like set in stone guide on getting it, but what would you say might be some of the things that you've done correctly to help steer you in that direction?
Oh boy, I really don't know what the criteria is. all I can say is I try to build a campaign that is a pleasure to look at, is straightforward and laid out so it's easy to follow. Has, have realistic numbers attached to it, clearly laid out different reward tiers. I know myself when I go to a campaign. Here's one little thing I say to anybody who's thinking about running a campaign. I would strongly urge you, right, as you can see, right underneath the title, Trekker Blood in the Wind, the first thing it tells you is a little bit about the story, but it tells you what the product is. It's a 120-page graphic novel. I have seen so many campaigns where they say, a fantasy adventure of so on and so forth. And it said, is it a comic book? Is it a hardcover? Is it a trade paperback? How many pages is it? I like to know that information right up front. That's important stuff.
You are the second person I interviewed. I talked to Madeline Holly Rosen.
Oh, yes.
And that was the first thing she told me, because I asked her, because she had a pretty successful Kickstarter too. I was like, what's your biggest thing? And she's like, make sure you let people know what it's about. And I'm like, that, because I would say a lot of the projects I look at don't have that. And you are the second person. You have an insanely successful Kickstarter. So I would say that has to be working. It has to. Real quick, we have Strider Nolan saying, asking, do you think you can make more from the project with Kickstarter than the traditional publishing route?
Yes, I do. I don't know that for sure, but if you just take a look at the numbers, 722 backers here. If I tried to sell a book to DC or Image or Marvel and said, I can give you 722 readers, they would not even look at you. You have got to make so much more money because you're helping to pay for an entire company, their overhead. They've got an editorial staff. They've got probably big, offices and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of overhead when you're running a company. I'm a guy in a room. Do you know what I'm saying?
Doing it all by yourself too.
Yeah. Now, again, on the other hand, if you can get DC or Marvel or Image or whatever to do your book, so to speak, they're going to be getting it distributed into comic shops. So you're going to have a lot more platforms. You're going to have a lot more venues to get your book out. So those numbers are going to go up. How much will they go up? That's going to depend on a lot of factors. So Trekker is a science fiction series about a young woman who's a bounty hunter. The other thing I didn't say there when I first made this pitch to Dark Horse, from the very beginning, my intention was she's fully clothed. Because back when I was doing this, if you had a female-driven comic book, they showed a lot of skin.
Yeah.
And maybe high heels and bustiers and all that sort of stuff. And I knew that if I drew a book like that, I wouldn't believe in it myself, let alone trying to create something that a reader would find believable. The only problem with that is it wasn't a very commercial idea, based on the sort of comic books that were being done then with women lead characters in it. So today it's a different market. It's an entirely different world, thank goodness. But but all those are factors into what things like that are factors into. She has short hair, it's whatever. What makes a book successful, commercial, marketable? I have no idea. It's never been anything I've been concerned with. I'm not saying that's right or I'm smart. I'm just saying that's the way it has been for me. So if you want to do a book for one of those companies, there's a different scale of expectations. Either you happen to just have the right idea that you're passionate. It also just happens to line up with what's commercially viable or acceptable or hot at the time. That's great. You can't count on that. At least I never felt you could.
I mean, you had a lot of the cards fall in your hand right off the bat, and you still left and went to go create on something different. I mean, I think that speaks for itself. Is this a video, like a trailer that you have?
Yeah.
Okay, so we could actually watch that. I'm just letting you know, if you try to talk, this audio will like override you. So while we watch it, the audience won't be able to hear you talk if you try to. So I'm just letting you know that ahead of time.
Okay.
Hold on 1 second. I've got sometimes StreamYard doesn't like to cooperate.
Oh, they weren't here either. Okay.
Yeah, one second. I need to turn up the volume, and then I can't. What if I ever try to full screen it? It always like messes it up. I don't know why. At least it's catching my voice this time.
Good. Still not hearing the sound. I hope they are.
I have it maxed out, so they should be hearing it pretty loud and clear. you're on the other side of it, we'll let you hear it. If not, though, I can
That's
edit
fine.
the audio in.
Okay.
Wow, your coloring is amazing.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Randall. Thanks for checking out this campaign for an all-new graphic novel starring 23rd century.
I hope they can hear this because otherwise.
Yeah, they said
I made a
they
lot
have
of
been able to
comments
hear
in
it.
my
Oh, good.
day, but
Great.
nothing is as rewarding and exciting to me as being able
Trekker
to
Talk saying
continue
they
to
love
tell
the
Mercy
drums.
and Molly's adventures thanks to the incredible support of their fans. I hope you'll be one of them. Now, this is my 7th Trekker campaign, but if you're new to Mercy's world, you couldn't have picked a better time to
Oh
jump
my
on
God,
board.
one had
Because
73,000.
Well Blood in the Wind
Wow.
continues Mercy's journey,
Yep.
featuring
That was
all the
astonishing.
elements
I was
long-time readers
shocked.
have come to expect.
That was the
It's
last
also,
campaign.
in many ways, a new
We have
beginning
Cyrox
for
Murdoch
Mercy,
saying artwork
as she
is
turns
boss,
a page
looks awesome.
and strikes out on a new path in her quest to oppose the forces of the oppressive system-ruling council. I also make sure that each volume of Trekker works as a great introduction to Mercy and her world, as well as a thrilling next standalone journey for long-time
These videos are
readers.
fun to
So
put together, too.
please check out the many reward tiers, everything from the book itself to the catch-up bundle containing the complete Trekker library of books to date, to original inkwash and watercolor commissions, to being drawn into the book and getting the page of original art featuring
That's
your
so
appearance
cool. I love that
in
part
Mercy's
so
world.
much.
And then
Thanks. It's always really
bundle
fun.
up. We've got a
Bundle
long,
up.
cold trek ahead of us. I'll see you on the trail.
Hey, so let me ask you this. I'll wait. Hold on.
Okay.
I really like those pink purple highlights too.
Thanks.
We definitely have to talk about the transition from black and white to color, because like
Sure.
it's like night and day. You know what I mean?
Yep.
A lot of people saying awesome intro video as well.
That's good. Yeah, it's a little bit longer than they usually have them, but I just had enough images. I thought, it should hold their attention, I hope.
Yeah. Okay, hold on. Let's finish up. We just had a few more seconds.
Right.
Awesome. I have to agree. Awesome video. So first things first, let me ask you this, because this is kind of, and let me adjust your mic right there real quick too.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people say there's a lot of hit and miss with the videos on Kickstarter. So what's your thoughts, I guess, overall? A lot of people say show the book. A lot of people say they want you to kind of talk to the camera. But as someone who's ran multiple successful Kickstarters, what's your thoughts overall on it, like a video for your Kickstarter?
Well, I think it isn't. For me, it's important to speak directly to the backers or to the people looking at the video. I think a big part of Kickstarter is the direct communication and the personal connection between the creator and the supporters. And I owe them a chance to see me and hear my words. At the same time, to me, it's about these characters and this story. So I start my videos off with some sort of quick images from the story, because this is what this book is. I want some representational images that maybe grab the attention and give them a sense of the type of drama that's going to happen. Then a few seconds of me talking, where I can see my face, and then I like to then go to that to like my voiceover behind some more images, talking about the perks or a little bit more about the content of that particular story. A mix of the two is what I'd say I go for.
We have Irish Imbus asking if Ron does the Kickstarter videos yourself. So are these something that you like record and edit yourself, or do you have someone help you along the way?
Yeah, the first campaign I did, I had somebody else help me along the way. But since then, I've taken it over to doing it all myself, and it's work. It can be kind of tedious or whatever. But I have come to really really enjoy it.
Yeah, it looks gorgeous. Like
I just use iMovie, and again, I have this. To me, it's a great luxury and advantage. I've got all the artwork from the book. So I can pull images out of there and sort of sequence them in ways.
Wait, iMovies, that's on the iPad, isn't it? The tablet, like iPhone tablets?
Yeah, and I've got it on my computer too.
That is remarkable. I would have thought you had to have used something far more expensive than that. The fact that you're able to create like this production level, I mean, anyone out there, like iMovies is on your iPhone if you have one. Like, that's so cool. Like, yeah. How long did it take you to learn how to do that?
I can't break it down by hours, but it was a lot quicker than I had thought it would have been. I was quite relieved to see it's really, you can just you can drag your like I shoot a video myself, and I drag that in there, and I can drag in all the images I'm going to be using, and you can drop them down into this field where you can change the order around, and you can adjust the lengths of the different pictures, and I drop a soundtrack in there underneath it, just the music, and I try to cue the pictures to transition at certain beats of the song,
Hey, you're probably like, man, I should have never paid that person to begin with. I could have done this whole entire time.
No, it was helpful to watch somebody doing it and pick their brain a little bit and get some pointers there. So yeah.
All right. Well, we talked so much. Real quick before we dive into this, I do want to ask, how was it transitioning from black and white to color? Like, because you're not just doing colors. I mean, some of those highlights, like they were like pink, purple. So like you were doing some in-depth coloring too.
Yeah, well, so first it was transitioning from color to black and white, insofar as before I did Trekker, I was working on, again, for DC, where I would do the line art and it would go and be colored and printed. So when I first started doing Trekker, I knew it was going to have to stand all on its own in black and white. So I was, panicked a bit. So when I started doing it in black and white, I put in lots of textures and shadows and patterns to make the art look really finished and done in black and white. And after I'd done a few issues of that, I sort of got a little bit more disciplined about that and let the black and white art, open up a little bit more. But then when we made the shift to color, boy, it was a learning experience there. Again, I picked the brains of some people I knew who were colorists and got some tips here and there, and just learned little by little as I went along. And whenever I'd see some coloring that would catch my eye, I would try to see if I could figure out an approach that could get me some portion of that, so to speak. The first few issues that I colored, I'd say I did a lot of what I would call sort of literal coloring, where the sky is blue and the trees are green, and then trying to bring in some color choices that were a little bit more surprising or a little bit less predictable, less obvious choices to just spice things up a bit. The main thing I try to use color for is to support the underlying story, like a soundtrack would do, where whatever the mood of the scene is supposed to be. I try to have the coloring maybe add to that, or at least just stay in the background behind that and not get in the way of the art. I've seen so many books where the color is just like poured on with all sorts of effects and dense patterns and rendering things, and it just buries the line art. And I come from that old school of make the line art strong and then have the color lie underneath it. That's the look I'm going for in my series, because that's what I like.
I had to ask that question because like I said, it was a transition. How long did you run the series for before you started adding color into it?
Well, I mean, for the time I first started, it was in black and white. Then we did have one issue that came out in the late 1980s. It was called the Trekker Color Special, because it was an issue in color. But then when I got back to it, I did a couple more that were in black and white. So really, from the time I really got back to it in earnest, we knew in like about 2011 or 12. From then on, I knew it was going to be all in color.
Okay.
And then one thing I did, and as we go through the reward tiers, I can even talk about this a little bit, but eventually I had to get all those stories that I'd done for Dark Horse, the ones that were done in black and white and were way out of print. And I needed to get those all back into print. So if somebody backs this campaign now, they can not only get this brand new, cool standalone story, which is a great introduction to Mercy and tells an adventure, but of course a lot of people want to know everything that happened before and they want to read it all. So I ran a campaign. One of the campaigns I ran was for a hardcover book that has all those original stories, where I've gone back and I've personally colored all those pages that had been in black and white, so that now you can get the entire series. That's all with the same presentation, so to speak.
Yeah, we had Trekker Talk saying that you colored every black and white issue for the Complete Journey Volume 1, so the entire series is in color now, and it looks amazing. So how was it? You know, you spent roughly, 20, 25 years doing black and white, and now the last 10, 11 years you've been doing color. How has that made your workday compared to before and after?
Well, it's more work because the coloring takes its own time. It does allow me to when I was doing the work in black and white and it was going to appear completely in black and white, I tried to make it look finished that way. When I was doing it in black and white and somebody else was going to do the coloring, I would leave some room for them to do some color. But now that I'm doing the coloring myself, I can more often say, okay, I'm doing the inking stage now, getting all the line art done, but I know that I'm going to be coloring it and I can do some of that stuff there. So I can often leave it a little bit more open in black and white because of what you can do with color when you
take a little shortcut here and there, kind of give you a little bit more time.
Yeah.
I got you. Well, let me reel away the questions and let's start breaking into this Kickstarter finally. So funded in 11 hours. Congratulations. That had to have been just phenomenal.
Yeah, it's a thrill. You hit that launch button, and when you see the pledges starting to come in, the first thing you feel is immense relief, and then it's exhilaration.
real quick, for anyone that's interested, here is the link to Trekker Blood in the Wind. Feel free to check out this Kickstarter while we're going through it, and don't hesitate. Make a pledge while you can. You can get the digital, the entry fee, $10 for 120 pages. Remarkable price. Yeah. So we start with
it's trekkerkickstarter.com is the
I put the link.
Oh, cool.
So while we were talking, I copy and pasted it. I'm pretty good at doing that behind the scenes. So awesome. 23rd century bounty hunter was, Trekker is a genuine badass. She really is. Right off the first, she shows that she has the guts that you wouldn't even believe. And I just love how Western, like you explained, it was such a perfect. She has that quick draw effect on it, and I loved Scuff too. Scuff was in the first issue, and then in Overtures we seen Scuff too. So do we see Scuff in this one as well?
Yeah, that the Scuff is her pet domesticated fox, which I called a Dox at the time. I put Scuff in from the beginning because, as you say, I wanted to show that she's like this badass, tough, determined, single-minded, relentless bounty hunter. But I also wanted to signal the readers that she is also a human being with an inner emotional life. And one way to do that, she comes back from her tough day out chasing down the bad guys, and there's this scruffy old pet. Why would a bounty hunter, an implacable killing machine, so to speak, have a pet? Well, it's because there's more going on there beneath the surface. And I wanted to tip the readers off to that right away, even though, it's the last thing in the world that Mercy would want anybody to see in herself. So, because again, from the very beginning, I knew a lot of where I wanted the series to go. And that was a lot of what
oh my God,
it's what it's all about.
Whole quote from Gail as well.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
I did, yep.
I have her Batgirl issue #1 upstairs. How did that feel, getting pull quotes from some of these big names in the showbiz?
Well, it turns out that Gail Simone, Trekker was one of the comics that she read when she was a fan before she became a pro. And the fact that I'd done a female, a badass female character like that, I think Gail
inspired her. Yeah.
I'm not going to claim that I inspired her, but I think she appreciated it. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I mean, dude, Batgirl's pretty badass too. I don't know. The similarities are there. How did that feel though? Because wow, that's impressive. That's awesome.
Well, when that quote is actually we first used that in this in a collection that we put out from Dark Horse a few years ago, and when we were getting the book prepared and they thought about having a quote, I said, well, the first person I'd want to have if we could get her would be Gail Simone. So we reached out to her, and she came through in spades. It was awesome.
That is so cool. And what she says, a female character that is sexy but not sexualized. Like there was at no point where I felt like it was like, you know, anything close to smut, you know, and that was a big thing back then, was showing a lot of, you know, more body parts and stuff. And you did a really good job of not doing that and still making her seem, you know, like a badass, you know, sexy female. Like it's just phenomenal.
I wanted a character that I wouldn't have to apologize to the women in my life for.
yeah. Mom's watching, I get it. So here's just a little bit about you, a little introduction about the things you've done in your many years. Supergirl, Star Wars, Predator, Venom, Swamp Thing even.
Yeah.
Wow. I love the Swamp Thing is awesome. Ram V's definitely been killing it lately.
Yeah.
So, and then here is just a look at everything you've done so far. So many books here. How many pages, if you had to take a guess, is just in this picture alone?
Okay, well let's break it down. That the one on the left, that's the hardcover, and that's got like, the book is 528 pages long. So of that, is 400 and some story pages there, and then each of the trade paperbacks has roughly 120 or so pages of story in there.
Oh my God! So over 1,000 pages each.
You did the math. You got 1,000 pages going on. Yeah, it's a lot of treasure.
And it's just a list of the complete library so far. So do you ever find yourself like kind of struggling, like to keep adding like more to the story, to keep it going and to keep it like invigorating for the readers?
No, as I have the basic outline for the series is mapped out now. So I know with each book that I'm approaching to do where that needs to take Mercy on her journey. What I don't know are a lot of the details about the story, and so I feel like I'm in that sweet spot where I know enough that I have a good sense of how to get to where I want to go, but there's room for, you know, inspiration, spontaneity. If I watch a TV show or read a book, I could, that's a great concept or an idea. My outline that I have is not inflexible. I can thread in new things that I see, which is great because I want the series to feel at the same time both familiar and the same to the readers who have been reading it for decades. But I also want it to feel like it's being done in this year. The story I'm doing now is being done in 2022. I'm not pretending it's still 1973 or whatever. I want it to feel somewhat contemporary, but still have that sort of classic, old school, high adventure sort of feel, because that's what the series is all about. I never want to violate that premise, but I want there to be these slow, gradual, incremental changes in the presentation of the story, just as there are in Mercy St. Clair's inner life and world and that sort of stuff.
We have a Rad Adventures Network saying the snow effects and the art for this book are beautiful. I have to admit, was this like the first time you've done snow, or has that?
It was the first time that I've done snow where I've colored it. Over the course of my career, I've drawn a few issues of things in the snow, but I've never really done, I guess I'd say, as deep a dive into it.
Was it challenging for you to like design that environment and make it feel like it was real, or was that easier for you?
It came fairly easy for me. I tend to be more comfortable doing sort of more organic story settings, setting in mountain ranges or in the forest or jungles. To me, the harder work are the stories that are set like in cities and where there's a lot of technological stuff going on and straight edges and stuff like that. I can do them, and obviously Trekker begins her life in that kind of a setting. But I sort of like the more organic, natural settings, raw nature. It just something primal about that.
Yeah. I really love this. I'm assuming like kind of like a glider jetpack. How do you design these? How do you design these contraptions? Like keeping them futuristic yet believable.
It goes through a lot of iterations. I start off with a basic concept. I just thought, Mercy's never done anything like this, which is flown around before. So I wanted a glider, but again, I wanted it to be that you put it very well. It's a balance between something that sort of feels sort of otherworldly or larger than life, but also has a sense of believability about it. It's the same approach I take when I was designing Mercy herself, and I wanted a costume that was cool and sort of sexy, but also practical looking. So it has straps and belts and pads for protection and that sort of stuff, but still doesn't look schlumpy. So I tried to do the same with this little glider thing. Yeah.
No, I definitely I love the look of it. And
Thanks.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in a way that I was thinking, in a way that sort of goes back to something that Joe Kubert said about Hal Foster was the guy that created Prince Valiant back in the 1930s. He said when Hal Foster drew a saddle, you could tell how thick the leather was. That saddle was made of, because Hal Foster did exhaustive amounts of research when he was telling these stories of, knights from the Arthurian age and stuff like that. So, and what I took from that phrase was, on something like Trekker, I want it to sort of feel believable, like the reader says, I think I know what that would feel like to be in that environment, or to wear that thing, or carry that load, or get
So what type of research did you do for this, though? Because I can
well,
feel I can see the thickness. I mean, you definitely had to do something. It looks awesome.
Well, thanks. At this point, I was looking at some sort of glider things, and I looked at the Leonardo da Vinci famously in his sketchbooks had designed like a gliding thing that I think they figured probably wouldn't have worked. Someone would have plunged to their death. But so I just look at stuff in the real world and then try to extrapolate it a little bit for what it might look like in the future, maybe plausibly. I'm not a scientist. I don't do that kind of science fiction. That's very, very good. But I try to not get too far into the fantasy end of things. I try to have it look like recognizable enough that somebody can see, there's a certain amount of functionality to it. To again, all just to try to sustain the air of sort of believability in the story, so that you'll believe that Mercy could be in this predicament, and how is she going to get out of this, and that sort of stuff.
So we've seen this blonde-headed, and I'm assuming a villainess. So are you able to dive into who she is and kind of like what's going on and why Mercy is after her?
Yeah, well, it's more. But yeah, so her name is Null. So Mercy starts her life off, as I said, the bounty hunter, but things change, and she winds up getting pulled into this larger conflict that's between the oppressive system, galactic system ruling council. They're called, and Null here is the leader of the Amber Swarm, which is like the council chairman's sort of personal strike force. I was well into the series before I got to the point of bringing her on stage. I thought, as we're getting towards as the action is beginning to build, and in a lot of ways the scale of the story is starting to expand, it's really important at the same time to have it become intensely personal. And they often say a hero is only as good or as compelling or as interesting as the villain. So I knew that she needed to have sort of like a nemesis that could be a reoccurring, very scary, very formidable foe. And so I came up with Null as her implacable adversary.
So when did Null first appear in Trekker?
A few trade paperbacks ago, she appeared in a story called Battlefields. I got you. So. Yeah.
She's kind of been bleeding in and out. Is this kind of going to be like their final throwdown, or are you not able to reveal that yet?
Oh, that would be a spoiler, so I better.
Okay, yeah. Well, we'll back it up. So let's go ahead and scroll down. This is also reader friendly now. So what makes it reader friendly compared to the other ones?
Well, they're all. What I mean by that is each of these stories, one thing I love about this format is they're these trade paperbacks or graphic novels. So they're all like 120 or 130 pages. That's enough story that I feel any competent storyteller should be able to do a complete self-contained adventure that introduces the characters, the world, sets up an adventure, and brings that story to a satisfying resolution and ending. So I want any Trekker volume to work that way. If a reader randomly comes across one of these Trekker books and picks up and reads it, I want them to say, that was a great story. I really got what was happening there. I sense that there is more cool stuff that happened before this story. I can tell that there's more stuff to come. So I want to try to have it work on that, each story work on that level.
Like a larger piece of the puzzle.
Right, yeah, it's a great standalone adventure. I want them all to be that. It introduces Mercy, explains where she's at, a little bit about where she's come from, has this adventure that ends by sort of pointing toward what's going to come. But if that's the only Trekker story you get, I want you to think, that was awesome. Obviously, if I do my job well, I want you to think, that was awesome, I need more.
And we have Trekker Talk saying Null and the Amber Swarm are fantastic villains.
Well, that's great to hear. Obviously, it's like I was saying, it's just as important to come up with good, compelling villains for the characters to fight, especially if you're going to have them reoccur. They need to hold their own. You know?
Right, here's 12 pages of the book. This is 12 pages, almost half of like what a regular like sized indie comic is already. So I mean, you're already showing a fantastic amount of pages too, because art really does sell itself. Let's be honest. People are going to see this and they're going to see the amount of work, of the detail, the colors, just it's all amazing. Do you find yourself having more success showing more pages? For anyone that out there that's listening, do you think that's kind of like a method that's been working for you?
I don't know about that. What I did here is normally I would not show the first campaign or two. What I did was I would have like one page and then you'd scroll down to see the next page, scroll down to see the next page. And I think I did that for like about a 5 or 6 page sequence, thinking, well, they can read this and get a sense for the story's about there. I just felt that was taking up more scroll time than I wanted. A lot of scroll
time, yeah.
So instead I thought if I just put a smattering of some of the pages that shows something of the variety of the page layouts out, color patterns, different subject matter in the art, that will give them a quick overview. And hopefully, if I've done my job as a storyteller right, each page will be clear enough to show roughly what's going on in the story at that point, or at least a little snippet of it, and they can get a sense about what's going on there. So I wanted to give just basically general impressions, kind of like in the earlier image where there's like a montage of images. It's just to really I think that I don't want to require the reader to read half of my story during the on the story page of the campaign.
Yeah.
I just quick impressions. I try to represent the story accurately. I mean, I'm showing actual pages from the story, and hopefully people will be able to tell from this if it's sort of in their ballpark.
And then right here is just the snippet saying it's already done, so it's pretty much just ready to get sent to the printer outside of some small things you have to do. Catherine Fleming, by the way, saying it worked well. It worked for them. So whatever you're doing is working. We've had nothing but fans of you in the chat, so that, I mean, it's pretty awesome. So the specs, it's going to be at least 120 pages, if not more, if they hit some stretch goals, which you have. And each previous trade paperback, the book will be squared. This just tells you the dimensions of the book.
Right, yeah.
So right here are the rewards. So what we'll do is we'll go through the rewards, and then we can go through the tiers on the side. So we'll go back up and then scroll through the different tiers you have.
Okay.
So the full rewards lineup, the digital reward, or actually I think this tells the tiers right here, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so the first rewards, the digital rewards, $10 for a PDF of the book, and then the digital series is $75. But that's over that's over 1,000 pages, right? Or is this even more?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little over 1,000 pages, I guess. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, you can have over 1,000 pages.
And then you can you get the physical book for $30. Includes a PDF of the book and a Kickstarter exclusive print. $30 is phenomenal for 120 pages too. Like, wow, I might have to manage my pledge. So usually when I'm trying to support people, I try to go for the digitals when I can, because I support a lot of people. I try to throw a little piece of the pie everywhere I can. But man, I after talking to you, seeing all the artwork, I'm gonna have to get this physical, because it's like PDF is good, but there's nothing like opening a fresh book. That fresh book smell. Oh.
Yeah, I agree with you. I almost always back campaigns at the physical level, because I'm a big believer of holding it. You have to have the space to store it all, and it is more expensive, sure. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's I want that physical experience of reading it.
So the retailer's blood is $45. So that's 5 copies of the book for $45. So what drove you to make it so? Because that is an outstanding price for the retail.
Well, the biggest maybe downside to me for Kickstarter is that it doesn't get my books into comic shops. So most retailers get inundated with books from the big 2 or the big 3 or the big 4 or whatever it is now. So they don't often go out of their way to find books on Kickstarter to bring into their shop. So I wanted to make it as approachable as possible for the readers that might want, for the retailers that might want to do that. So I love the idea about walking into a comic book shop and seeing my books there, but I don't have like a distribution setup to get that stuff to happen. So this is the best thing I can do in my own modest way to try to make it something that bookstores could carry if they wanted to.
No, yeah, that seems like such an awesome thing, because to me, like as a consumer, it seemed like you'd almost be like eating it at this cost to do that.
Yeah, it kind of does. But the idea is that if there's books on the shelves, I'll make some new readers. So it's my little outreach program.
So is there something like in the book that kind of like lets them know like they can go on the site or like where to like direct them where to find more?
There is not, and there should be. So that's an excellent point. I'll do that on my next book.
Hey, at least this interview, you got something from it, right?
That's right, absolutely.
So the book sketch for $5 so this would be for $20 more. You're going to get a print of the book, a quick sketch in the book, and a PDF of the book, plus the Kickstarter exclusive. I always am a sucker for these quick sketches. There's nothing more personal than having that with the signature right next to it.
Right. And one thing I should mention as we're going through these rewards that I didn't add to the list there is that at every one of these physical levels, besides what it does list there, you will also get whatever stretch goal rewards we unlocked.
Okay.
So like we've already unlocked a bookmark, and we're going to be adding a little mini print, which is the wraparound cover will come for that. And as the campaign does well in the past, I've added some, like I've done enamel pins, and I had a challenge point on last campaign. Yeah, so that's so for your if you pledge $30 or $50, you get all that stuff plus quite a few other little items that are kind of funds as well. So just thought I'd make that point.
The written in blood tier, you get everything listed, and you also get your name appearing in the book as well.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So it appears in the background or in the book on a signer object. So kind of like maybe like a book or some sort of like billboard.
Yeah, guys' names have appeared on billboards and posters and on a bottle of whiskey. Sometimes sometimes it's a name that's referred to in the dialogue, like Smith's going to get that or something like that. So your name can drop that in. That's a tremendously popular reward, and those are already gone. They sell out. Always first day.
I would imagine with the following you have, people are going to like die at the chance to get their name in the book. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it happens. Yeah.
You can get the complete Trekker library for $170, and this is over 1,000 pages of content, and this is all physical books too. Like this is that's pretty insane. So what's the number on that? That's 6 books plus the volume 1.
Right. Yep.
So what
and one thing that some people need to be reminded is that the big book there, which I've got a copy of right here at hand, it's
500 pages.
Yeah, the big book is 528 pages, and those are all stories that happened before all those other books you see.
Yeah.
Those are all trade paperbacks, the continuing stories.
It comes out to you know what? Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I didn't even do it right. Hold on. It comes out to cheaper than actually buying the book separately.
It should be.
Yeah, $24 and some change. So you'd get each book at $24, and you're buying the physical itself at $30. So I mean, that's a pretty good deal in itself.
Yeah.
And then Voices in the Wind. So for $200, your cameo role in Acers. Did I say that right?
Yeah, I think so. Yep. And so what that is a little company, I guess, of audio drama makers. Mm-hmm. They are adapting Trekker and a few other comic book and other series to audio dramas, and so they have their regular cast of characters, but they have little cameo roles where you could do the voice of some cop in the background or a thug or something like that, and you'll have a line.
That's awesome.
It's thrilling to hear the productions that they've done of the they've
How does
already
that
adapted
feel?
the first
Like,
two.
how does it feel to have someone?
It feels great. There's the sound editor of it does a tremendous job of finding great background music and sound effect music to really evoke, and it feels this is exactly the right sound for the Trekker world. They've done a great job. The 2 actors that they have playing Mercy and Molly, the 2 principals in the book, do just wonderful jobs, and their voices and their performances are just note perfect for the characters. I'm just thrilled with it.
It's funny to hear Molly's back, because I remember the first issue, or it was one of the first, one of the first 3. Mercy almost shoots her in the face when she pops through the door, because it was like a surprise, from shopping.
Yeah, she wasn't expecting Molly to show up. Molly was dropping by the apartment.
Yeah.
Scuff. And that was.
She was waiting for a gatefish, and it was her friend.
Yeah, that's another way to show that tricky juxtaposition when you want to be a badass bounty hunter, but you have these other people.
Yeah. So for 215, so you get the Blood Ink Commission, and this is where you're going to get an original 11x14 ink wash commission on one character your choice.
Yeah, and that was a popular reward tier, and it sold out, and I did more, and it sold out, so then I raised the price. So yeah,
Hey, I mean, it's always good when you have to raise the price because it keeps selling out so fast.
yeah.
So for 410, you get a original 12 by 16 watercolor commission, one character of your choice as well.
Yeah, those are always fun, and again, very popular ones. I do those on high quality watercolor paper, and I just get some amazingly fun requests for those things. Doing the commissions is one of the things that, obviously those amounts are pretty substantial. So when I get a commission request from somebody, it helps the campaign do well.
Yeah.
And it also gives me a tremendously fun thing to draw. So
is this something you would say, like, if someone is like an artist or maybe a creator, like artist writer, they should consider maybe doing something similar like this if they have somewhat of a following?
Yes, I think it's a great thing to do if you if that's in your wheelhouse. Set a realistic number, limit the number of them you're going to take on, and charge a price that feels right to you. That can be tricky to do, to assess what your sketches might go for to your fans, and some of that depends on the material you use, the scale of them, how complicated you're willing to get with them. If somebody wants me to do a campaign and a commission, and they want, say, Mercy with Molly, or they want their two favorite Avengers on there, so well, if it's two figures, I charge more than I do for one, because it's more work, and it's a job. You've got to take it that way. Yeah.
So for you, like with the ink wash and then the watercoloring, what was for you when you were determining these two different prices, kind of the factors in that?
Well, I've done a lot of conventions by now, and I've set a price and seen how that seemed to be received by people, and I try to make it sort of feel like I'm giving them good value, but I'm not undercharging myself. Again, it can be it's like trying to sell a piece of original art. It's a very subjective thing.
Yeah.
With me, I'm a professional artist. I look at what some of my colleagues charge for things and try to come up with something that seems reasonable to that. I mean, the big superstars are going to charge $1,000 or $2,000 a piece. I'm not in that field, but I'm also not going to do them for $25 each. So I have to I have to try to price that where I feel like I'm being fair to myself and also to the backer. It
has to be hard because, like, you know what I mean. It's like, what do you value your time at?
Right. Yeah.
So, and then down below we have a Drawn in Blood. So for $525, you can get an appearance in the issue. And you were talking, it's one of the backstories, right?
Yeah, it's the backup story, and you're drawn into the tale, and then you get the piece of original art that you appear on. It's the only way to own Trekker original art. I don't sell any of the Trekker originals. I've always kept all those. So
is that something just because you want to always have that piece of art with you, or is there another reason?
Well, yeah, no, I just couldn't figure out. Like I said before, when you come to pricing your commissions, you have to set at a price that you're comfortable letting that piece go with, and there wasn't a price that I could set on Trekker.
This is your baby, though, right? Like,
yeah, it's my baby. Yeah.
So, and then here are some of the add-ons. So, digital add-on reward available for all backers for $70. You can get the full digital bundle. Physical add-on rewards, $15 per set. You can get enamel pins.
Yep. I've got some of them right here in my hand.
So we have Mercy, then we have Scuff, and we have Molly.
Yep, and that's the ship, the Dark Star Zephyr, is the ship that they're now getting around the galaxy in.
And so for $15 each, you can get physical copy of any Trekker trade book as well. And then $60 for the 5, and that's an outstanding price, because I mean it's like 5 times the amount of the physical, right?
Yes, it is.
In terms of pages?
It is a heavy book. It is a big, thick volume, and I'm very happy with it. It's got a lot of bells and whistles to it. It's got a de-embossed cover with a spot varnish on it, and it's got a ribbon bookmark in it.
Oh man, you went all out with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was the campaign did very well, and so those are all stretch goals that we added.
Okay.
There's a section in the back where I take the very first Trekker story. Again, I've still got all the original art from it, so I scanned it at a very high resolution, full color scans, and printed it in the back of the book as sort of like an artist edition version of it, where you can see the art with the little pencil marks on it and all that. So
that is awesome.
Yeah.
So limited edition for $120, Complete Journey Volume 1 Plus, tipped in print. So it adds the exclusive signed and numbered watercolor print bound into the hardcover book.
Yep.
That is awesome. You have some really high value add-ons. Like this is good. Like I've been through a ton of Kickstarters, and this is really fleshed out. I really, a lot of different Kickstarters, but what you're adding is like stuff you're able to achieve in a short period of time. This is stuff that you can get done yourself. You don't have to wait on like fulfillment from another company or a shipment. So these are all like stuff you can get done like, within a reasonable time.
Yeah, and you put your finger right on it. Because people say, well, how about adding, coffee mugs and T-shirts and stuff like that? That's a lot of extra moving parts. It's more tricky to ship those things in and out and around. And the more people I bring into working on it, the more chances there are for delays and that sort of stuff. So as much as possible, I try to keep the fulfillment end of it as streamlined and straightforward as I can to avoid delays that are going to mean it's going to take longer for the books to get into the backers' hands and take too much of my time away from me, because all I really want to do is write and draw these stories.
Yeah.
Everything I'm doing on the Kickstarter campaigns is to finance my ability to write and draw the stories. So again, it's like we were talking before about the art end of things. I'm always making trade-offs. How much can I devote to this because I think that will give me more support and readers, and how much time will that take that I'm then robbing from the time I get to spend making the stories as good as possible. And it's a lot of questions to be answered.
And another thing is, like, when those coffee mugs don't come in, people aren't mad at the coffee mug production place. They're mad at you
right.
because you are the one running the Kickstarter. So it's like it just takes that stress off your shoulders.
Right.
So for
exactly.
$135, you're going to get the catch-up bundle. So every print of every page of Mercy's previous adventures, the Deluxe Volume 1, Chapeltown, Darkstall Zephyr, Battlefields, Hunter Moon, and then Reckoning on what's the word? I mispronounced it. Rigel. So Reckoning on the Rigel as well. And that's probably where I was, right? With Overtures?
Yes. Right.
Okay. So, man, awesome. And that's right there is another 1,000 pages. So $135.
Yes.
So now we came to the stretch goals end of things. So this is where all the fun begins.
Yeah. Yep. In some ways it is.
With next up, so stretch goal number 8, 51,500. You get a mini poster. How are you coming up with these numbers? This is just like what it's going to cost extra to kind of get the poster printed and produced?
Well, yes, some of that money is it's based on what, they add up. So this is the 8th one. So the first stretch goal is like, $2,000 or $3,000 beyond the funding goal. Mm-hmm. And that covers the cost of adding that. In that case, it was some extra pages to the story. So that I have to pay the printer for a slightly bigger book. Some of that stretch goal covers that cost. And again, the rest is putting a little bit of money into my pocket to start paying me back for the work. So that's what the stretch goal intervals do. They cover the cost of producing the new reward or whatever, and they pay me a little bit more money towards my oatmeal and coffee.
So was it hard to coordinate like fighting in the sky? Have you done that a lot with previous stories with Trekker, or was this like battle?
No, this is a new thing to do. So, but I loved it. It's characters. I've drawn flying characters before. You draw superheroes, you're gonna draw people flying, and it's like drawing sort of a combination of people swimming and ballet dancing and stuff. It's got to be graceful, and there's got to be a lot of use of body language to shift the sense of weight, and the sense of motion and stuff is it's got a certain amount of drama and energy built into it, or baked right into the setting. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to do it.
And then let's go through the already added. So Richer Blood of Blizzard of behind the scenes content for 31,000. Stretch goal number 235, cover spot gloss. Stretch goal 3, 38,500, inside covers art. And then stretch goal 4, 42,000, wraparound cover art. Stretch goal 5, 44,500, commission gallery. So you're gonna have a couple pages of different commissions that you've done.
Yeah, several pages of it. And these are the commissions I've done when people have requested the characters from the series.
So like the ones you did the last Kickstarter, or the ones you did this Kickstarter?
Right. Yeah. The one from the previous Kickstarter. Because those are ready to go. I haven't.
So two birds, one stone. That is so awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's a way because usually when somebody does a commission for me, I do the commission, I send it to them, and they're the only people that get to see it. This way, everybody that backs the campaign can see all the commissions I've done of Mercy and Molly and the characters in the world.
It's a spinning circle. Just keep feeding into it one another. It's such a brilliant plan, though. Honestly.
Thanks. It started because I did some of these commissions and said, boy, I really like the aspect of Mercy's personality or the pose that I did on Molly in that shot. I really like that. I would like to share that with some of the other readers, because it's just one backer that usually gets to look at these things. So I thought, well, like this commission gallery, it sort of works on multiple levels.
So when you first started doing that, did you have any backlash? Did you reach out to ask if it, because you own the rights to this, right? How does that go?
No, that's it. I own the rights to it's my work, right? So I can print that. Yeah.
I mean, if anything, it would be an honor to have the one that you commissioned be the favorite, right?
Well, that's what I hear. I hear people say, "Oh, it was really cool to see that you took my commission." Then, sometimes I use them on posts on social media, commissions I've done in the past. If I'm really happy with them, I think somebody might get excited and then check out the campaign because of this. And the people that own the commission seem to be happy about that too.
And we have Catherine Fleming saying the gallery is one of their faves. I have to say it's such an awesome idea. That's why I wanted to ask, because if anyone's watching and they decide to maybe do something like this on their own, I figured they might as well ask that question too, because it's always good to know, and why not ask the man who's been successfully doing it for years. So stretch goal number 6, 47,500 soft touch cover laminate. So this yields an almost 3D effect for the book.
It's just great. I mean, the first time I offered it a few campaigns ago, I'd come across some graphic novels, some trade paperbacks, and I would just feel the cover and say, "What is that?" It just felt so, usually the cover finish is kind of slick and it's very nice, but this felt a little bit thicker without being overly heavy and stiff. But there was just something to the textural, sensation you get from holding your hand. It felt more substantial. It just felt cool, man. It just felt cool.
Yeah.
So I started adding it a couple of books ago, and I just think it makes the books feel more substantial in your hand, and I really like it. And then they do that, and then they put the spot gloss on top of that. It's a different process they have to use, so it's more expensive, but it gives it an even more sort of raised effect to the figures. That's where the spot gloss goes over the figures on the cover, so they tend to pop out even more. I just think it's not the sort of thing that I was thinking about at all when I first started preparing these Kickstarters. I just wanted to make the book.
Yeah.
But when I looked at the campaigns and talked to people and looked at some of the stretch goals people were setting up, and I saw how cool they made the physical objects, I started adding some of those, and so then that became a really fun thing to see us unlock.
Yeah, and it sells the book even better. I would say, in my experience, any sort of graphic novel that I've gotten, if it had a cool cover, I always kept going back for more.
Yeah, exactly.
Stretch goal number 7, 49,500 bookmarked in blood. So this is where we unlock the awesome checker bookmark. Is this double-sided?
Yes, right. Yeah, and just who doesn't love a good bookmark? When I back campaigns, I love to see the bookmarks.
I just got one in the mail, and I don't know, I usually read through a book fast enough to where I don't use the bookmark, but it's always I love having it,
and that's kind of thing too, because I want people to sit down and just blow through this book right away, but 120 or more pages, a lot lot of people can't just sit there and read it all in one go.
Especially for that first volume, 528 pages.
You need a bookmark for that thing.
A couple of them. So keep us flying to add more bonus bounty to every physical level backer's rewards. So shipping fulfillment by black box. I like this. A lot of campaigns don't include the shipping, the person they're getting it shipped from. So what kind of made you want to add this snippet?
Well, it goes back to when I was getting ready for my first campaign and I was asking for advice. I was thinking, well, should I try to fulfill the campaign myself and have everything shipped to my house, me package it all up and getting the rewards out to everybody? And I was told that, well, it kind of depends on how many backers you have as to how much work that's going to be and how much it's going to add on to your own.
700 would just be a nightmare.
Yeah, and I had somebody who was using Black Box and recommended them, and they said they were good, solid, and so on and so forth. Because that was important to me. If I was going to take, because they're like my partner in making sure my readers are satisfied. The experience needs to be a good one all the way through.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is, does the book arrive safe and on time and undamaged? You know, so I just felt that the money that I pay to Black Box to provide this service is worth it for me, because it frees up that all the time and effort I would take to have to do all that shipping myself, and then the headaches of having to deal with it. They're great if a package gets damaged or lost or something like that. They just get on fixing that.
So
right
you have
away.
that insurance that has to,
Yeah.
that peace of mind you can't put a price on, really.
Right. I mean, you know, theoretically I could do all the fulfillment myself, but it would take more time away from writing and drawing the stories, number one. And number
I can't
two,
imagine how much your post office would hate you coming up with
Yeah.
722 packages.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I'm doing a lot of these campaigns, and every campaign that I do, I print a lot of extra books beyond the ones that are going to those backers. That's why I can offer on a campaign like this all those catch-up bundles. You can still get the first book that I did, Chapeltown, because I've still got a lot of those books left. I don't have room in my house to store all of those extra copies, so Black Box is also the warehouse where I pay out a certain amount of money every month to reserve some space in the storage there. So I've got a supply of stock of books there to service the rest of the campaigns I'm doing.
And they're also behind Cards Against Humanity, so they're a pretty big company.
Yeah.
And then right here's a little bit about the shipping rates: $8 US, $10 Canada, $15 the rest of the world. That's a pretty insane international shipping cost.
Yeah. It's that was a rate that Black Box was able to come up with.
That is insane. Like, I see a lot of them like double.
Yeah, and my last campaign was quite a bit higher, but this campaign, Black Box, I don't know what they got, some special magic they come up with, but so I was able to offer much lower international shipping rates, and hopefully that'll last. I do take a bit of a gamble. I don't use one of the services where you add the shipping costs after the campaign ends, which a lot of people do use. But I just like the backers to know how much they're paying right up front. The risk is if your shipping costs ain't going to go down. So if the shipping costs go up a lot, then I'll just have to
end
take
up eating
that.
it.
I'll have to take that on the chin.
But I mean, it's like 30 days. So do you? They usually probably don't spike that high in 30 days, right?
Well, no, but once the campaign runs, still it's going to take a few months before the book gets printed and all that.
That's true.
So, and a lot of things can happen then, but hopefully I'll get it shipped out before the end of the year. Yeah.
I appreciate you explaining that, because I'm like, man, it's only 1 month, can't change, and I didn't think you had to wait a couple months for it to print and the fulfillment. Yep. So right here's another thing I was talking about too. Where does the money go? Madeline made this a big thing. She liked to do a little chart where she explained where it all go, and it's funny to see the second, the highest Kickstarter campaign I've interviewed. So you got that #1 spot right now. Seeing that this is another similar thing that's been done, explaining where the money goes. So for you, why is it important to explain this to the person backing?
Well, I just realized that, well, by now I've done 7 of these, and a lot of the people that are back my campaigns, they get the book in their hands, they probably say, for the money I paid, I got good value here, I don't need to know the details. But somebody who is, I still want new people to find my campaigns, people that don't know me, have never heard of Trekker before. And I mean, it's just important to be relatively transparent about this sort of stuff. I'm not a big numbers guy myself. The first few campaigns I had the pie charts, and this percentage goes to shipping, this percentage goes to printing costs, all that sort of stuff. And now I just do it in sort of more broad terms, just because some people aren't aware of how much it takes to make one of these books. Besides those things, I do pay for some professional help. I pay an editor, because I think everybody could use a good editor. I do the finish coloring myself, but I have Caitlin Like, a gifted, talented colorist in her own right. She does the color flatting, which it's a technical term, but it means she basically sets down some initial colors on all the pages, so it's easy for me to go in and tweak them and finish it off. I pay somebody to help with my print, to help me work with the printer to make sure that the paper that we select and the settings that we use are going to get the book to print out and look like I want it to look. Printers speak a very special language, and if I use the wrong term with the printer, I might get a book that doesn't look like I want it to look. I pay somebody that speaks printer for me and helps me deal with that stuff. There's just a few essential steps in the process that I'm not I'm not accomplished in enough yet to be confident that I could pull it off and have it work well. When the stakes are that high, I want to get people that are really good at
No,
helping.
it definitely, it sounds like you have something gold, and the only way to really make sure it's gold is to make sure it's well maintained. Like, you have to keep the machine well oiled to keep it running, you know, and it's been running for 35 years. So what you've been doing has been great. I want to ask real quick, was it important for you to have like a female editor, or like did you have like a female editor in the beginning because your character is a female? So like from that standpoint, like writing a female character, you know, was it hard like doing that and making sure you did it justice?
Yeah, I didn't have a female editor at Dark Horse, and I was very aware, even back when I started it, that I was a guy, a dude, writing a female character, and it was a concern I had because I realized I was open to, you know, criticism. You don't know what a woman's like or whatever. Largely, I took the approach then initially of just saying, I'm going to just try to make her reactions, her responses, her motivations seem like what I think any human would do by and large. And that served me well, I think, in this first set of stories. People seem to, you know, I'd be at a convention and a guy would come up to me and say, I want you to know, Ron, your comic is the only comic I can get my girlfriend to read.
That's
things
awesome.
like that. That meant a lot to me. You know, I observed, I paid attention to this, and I was lucky enough to have some pretty remarkable women in my life. Women who, you know, who were strong, self-directed, you know, not only smart, but intuitive and just great human beings. And so I would, you know, put bits of those personalities into Mercy and into Molly too. All of that said, that a few years later when I did start to, I worked with a few female editors on Trek now, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate the perspectives that they bring. It isn't often saying things, oh, you shouldn't do it this way, Ron, but they'll just sometimes make little suggestions, or even if it's just
nudge.
Yeah, or even if it's just giving me a thumbs up, saying, well, it's reassuring to know that I'm still sticking within the realm of what seems like it's realistic, you know, personality patterns and behaviors and actions and that sort of stuff.
We have a Catherine sorry to interrupt, but we have a Catherine in the chat asking, do you use any feedback from your wife for any of this?
Yeah. It's, you know, it's a tricky thing. You're living with somebody. I'm always inviting. My wife's name is Lynn, and I'm always inviting her feedback, her perspectives. You know, when you're living with somebody, often when you say, how do you like this? What you're really saying is, do you love me? As a creative person,
be nice.
You have to learn how to parse the responses in a way and not become overly dependent on it. But but I could not take her opinions and perspectives into account.
Yeah, I know. For what I do, God bless my girlfriend, because like I put a lot of hours in, and I'm sure you do too. Like, you know, bless them for being so forgiving for us being away from them for such long periods of time. But man, she has to get tired of it, because I'm always like, hey, check this out, or hey, did you see this social media post? Like, what's your thoughts on this? And like, man, like if it wasn't for them, like where would we be, right?
Right. Yeah, you got to have somebody to bounce these ideas off of and triangulate opinions with and stuff like that. Yeah.
So risk and challenges. Risk are extremely low because you're already done with the book.
Yep.
So basically, we're just looking at like shipping delays, just current world, like, you know, if anything like COVID happens again, you know, that's kind of out of your hands.
Yeah, things like that. The what's going on over in Ukraine, you know, and the causes, you know, supply shortages, working shortages. There's a lot of instability in the world out there right now, and those things are just out of everybody's hands. So what I can do is I just take care of getting my ducks in a row as best I can, and sort of hope for the best. I was really pleased that the last campaign I had a little bit of a delay in the printing, but my delay was a matter of 2 or 3 weeks. I know other people whose books were delayed by months in getting printed.
There's people out there who's had their campaigns funded and still haven't shipped out the book. So I mean,
that happens a lot. I was very happy. Yeah.
So I think that pretty much we covered most of the Kickstarter. Would you say is there anything else that we haven't covered?
I think you've gone through it pretty well there. We get all the rewards and that sort of stuff. So
let's get ready to start wrapping up. We've been here for almost 2 hours. I knew this was going to be I knew this was going to be a good talk, though. I knew this was going to be one of those where, you know, I had to scratch your brain for a lot of information because you've been 35 years in the game, so you've been doing something right to keep afloat, you know. So let me ask you real quick, what would you say your biggest like top 3 pieces of advice for anyone running a Kickstarter, like their first or second one, people that are new to the game? What type 3 pieces of advice would you give them to kind of help them like make sure it's going to be on the right track? You know, obviously it's up to you if it's going to be successful or not, but like at least get them on the right track.
Well, one of them is what I've already shared. It's called crowdfunding. You need a crowd. You can't launch a campaign without having laid some foundation and have some sort of plan in mind to try to draw a crowd into your campaign. That's a big one, and there's a lot of different possible ways you can go about doing that. We've talked about a few of them here. One of them is do not launch your campaign until you're ready to launch a campaign. Don't say, oh, the best window is the middle of June or something like that. If you don't have your reward tiers all figured out, you haven't done the research you need to do for shipping costs or printing costs, if you could possibly wait until your book is done, or at least a large chunk of it. The more of your book you have done before you launch a campaign, the more tools you have, visual aids and so on to talk about during the campaign, and the less chance there'll be of massive delays happening after the campaign. Once people get their campaign done and it's funded and the money's in their hand, it's amazing how many things can come up to make it no longer be a priority to draw the next page.
Yep.
It's human nature. Those are a couple of big ones. I was going to think of the third one, but those kind of took it out of my brain for now.
If we only have 2, we have 2. So with that being said, for anyone that's watching that's on the fence for backing this amazing campaign, what would you like to say to them to kind of help push them over that edge?
Oh, first of all, I realized the third one I wanted to say.
Oh yeah, let's go back.
So the third thing would be, if you're going to run a Kickstarter, back a lot of other Kickstarters first. 2 big reasons for that. One is when you back a campaign, you can follow the campaign, you can observe, you can see the way they do their updates, how they interact with people, and you can learn things from them. Oh, that person did that. I don't want to do that. It's too much work or wouldn't fit my project, but that's a great idea. I'm going to take that one. I do it all the time. And also by backing other campaigns, you sort of become part of the Kickstarter creator community. And then when you run your own campaigns, you have some people that you can reach out to and talk with and communicate with and that sort of stuff. So those are the 3 things.
So real quick, on that note though, how important are the updates for you? Like when you're doing your Kickstarter, like how often do you find yourself reaching out with updates during your campaign?
It kind of depends. When I'm unlocking a new big stretch goal, I will try to reach out for that. Because staying engaged with the current backers, they might want to up their pledge level if there's something that's exciting, or if I add a new reward or something like that. So once every few days, sometimes I'm doing an update. Sometimes it may only be once a week while the campaign is running, and then the frequency drops down once the campaign is over. But I still, as I'm going about the costs, the processes, the steps of doing the commissions and getting the book ready for the printer and shipping it to the printer and getting the other things, prints or enamel pins made, I post periodic updates just to keep the backers up to speed with the progress that's being made. That's super important.
Okay.
And then if there are any crazy delays happening, it's so important. That's the most important time to be in contact with your readers, is when things are going bad, when there are delays, so that you don't just drop off the radar and ghost them. You've got to stay in communication. It doesn't have to be every day. You don't have to be neurotic about it, but every few days during the campaign, maybe once a week during the campaign, and then maybe monthly afterwards or something. Because
it shows you're not jumping ship. So I definitely get that. Like no one wants to admit when there's a mess up, but it's important for you to take it to the chin.
Yeah, the most important thing to say is, I got some bad news.
Yeah.
But here's what I'm doing to address the bad news. We're still going to do this. It's just the time frame is different or whatever it is. But transparency is so important.
So let's go ahead and get back to that Kickstarter, though. So for anyone out there that's on the fence about backing this Kickstarter, what would you like to say to them directly?
Really, I'm a terrible salesperson, so I don't know. Beyond, I would say, if you would just take a look at the campaign, take a look at the tone of the way I describe the story. Take a look at the art. If that stuff seems to work for you, then there's a good chance that reading the book the way I execute it. I mean, I've had a lot of time telling stories and working and living with these characters. So I think I do a pretty good job of bringing those stories across on the page. Like a lot of people on Kickstarter, my book is my passion project. I've done a lot of comics for DC and Marvel and stuff over the years, as I say in that story there. Nothing is anywhere near as fun and exciting and rewarding as telling these stories. And I'd like to think that the more of them you read, that they have a cumulative effect. The world gets richer and the characters become more vivid and alive. And to me, that's what it's all about.
I think you are a salesman. Don't lie. Like, don't lie. So we came to one of my favorite parts of the podcast, and that is where I ask one of my favorite questions. I usually ask indie comic creators advice on what they would do to get started, but for someone who's been in the game for 35 years, I think that question is a little beneath you. I want to ask you, as someone who's a writer and an artist, like, how do you deal with like not burning out? How do you deal with like staying going, staying passionate, keeping the work pumping out without burning out and like just getting stuck in that burnout stage? Because that seems like something with 35 years of experience, like you've had to have gone through it.
Well, I feel sort of insanely lucky to be able to say it's really not a problem with Trekker, because again, I've lived with this series a long time. I've told a lot of stories, but I've got ideas for the rest of the stories that I want to tell, and I'm excited to get to them all. So even though I have days where it's kind of hard slog, and for whatever reason I'm not feeling really great, or the way this sequence is blocking out isn't working as well as I thought it would, but oh, look what I get, if I do this, then I get to do that next. So it's just, I have a constant carrot dangled in front of me, is I got more cool stories to tell. So it's really helped a lot. Over the course of my long career, though, yeah, I've worked on scripts for, different people, where I just say, I don't understand what the story exists for. Why is it around? Is it just because I need to publish 22 pages of this title this month and they didn't have a real story to tell? So I'm just, going through the motions. It's a lot of work to draw a comic book, even if I'm not, even the ones that I'm not writing, when I'm just drawing it, it's a tremendous amount of work. And to do all that work and say, to what purpose? Yeah, that can be exhausting. I always say something I learned from Joe Kubert is that, if you've got a story to tell, there is an infinite number of ways you can possibly tell that story. Ways to use certain images to break down this sequence that I haven't done yet. Do I want to close up here? Do I want to close up there? Do I want to have this scene all in shadows? Do I want these different kind of angles? So there's always something to try to tinker with the machinery, so to speak. And even when I'm working on a script that is kind of flat and kind of lame, the idea is to rise to the challenge and make that as vivid as you can and as compelling as you can. So, I think the challenge can always be there. You just have to be passionate about telling a story. If you just like to draw pretty pictures, don't do comic books for a living. That's not this job. It's nice if you can draw really well, as long as it's serving the story. But to me, the fire in the belly is, I got a great story to tell you. You're not going to believe what Mercy does this time, or what happens to her, or what she and Molly get into. If you got that 10-year-old passion, mom, guess what I saw on the way to school today? That's if you can get that going. If that comes across on the page and the reader gets that, you're going to have them in the palm of your hand.
Wow, what an awesome response, Ron. I appreciate so much you coming on here, breaking down with Trekker every bit of 2 hours. This was such an in-depth conversation, and I loved it. I can't wait. Real quick, how long do you think we can see Trekker running in the future? Do you have, or is that still spoiler territory?
Yeah, and there's some people that want to know that. And
let's back it up.
Yeah, I don't want to be coy, but to me, it feels like it might sort of take you a little bit of the edge off of things. So I'm going to leave that one vague for now. But I'll just say that I've got it roughly figured out, and hopefully people will, be able to put their faith in me.
Hopefully for the next the next graphic novel, we can get you back on and talk about what happened to Trekker since then.
Sure.
But until then, guys, it is time for us to wrap up. I hope you guys have a fantastic Tuesday night, but most importantly, guys, keep it geekly.